Good morning, everyone. I haven't been in this pulpit in a month, right? You haven't been in these seats in a month, right? Yes. Yeah. I just realized that this morning because the Advent wreath was still here and we hadn't put all the tape back on the pews. And another thing to file under, it's been a while. I forgot a stole this morning. I'm still a minister, don't worry. And I realized that a few minutes ago. Anyways, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming out on this very, very cold day. I'm very happy to see all of your faces. And I just want to give a couple quick announcements before we start. First of all, I think you've all by now read my email about wearing surgical masks in here. And there's a lot of articles about that. So thank you for doing that. And we'll always have some at the back if you forget. But thanks for doing that for us, for all of us. This week, the caring team is going to start calling everybody. I think somebody has already actually started their phone calls just to reach out, just to see how you're all doing, how you're faring, if you need anything, if there's anything we can do for you. So I really hope you'll all answer the phone when the caring team person calls you, even if it's just to say, thanks, I'm fine, don't worry about me. But really, this is, we care about each other. We need to care for each other. So we're just checking in with everybody now that the holidays are over. So if you get a call, I hope you'll answer it. Another thing we've decided is, as you can tell, it's a little quieter in here, that RE is happening solely in Sampson Hall for the rest of the month. Just for safety concerns, since the littlest kids are not vaccinated and they're going to school, just to protect all of us. So we won't be having a time for all ages today or for the rest of the month. And then we'll reassess by the end of January for February, just to make sure everybody's safe. So any questions or concerns, feel free to talk to me, feel free to talk to Laura. We're all here to support you if you've got concerns, but we're just trying to do the best we can to keep everybody safe. So that's it for now. So I invite you all to take a deep breath in and out. This is my favorite part of the service, I have to say. Let's do it one more time. A deep breath in and out. Let yourself rest into your pew. If you have any tension in your head or your neck or your face, just try to let it go. Keep breathing deeply and just let yourself rest. Give yourself this hour to be present, to be in this space with us. Put your phones away, put your to-do list away. It'll all be waiting for you when church is over. And thank you for being with us this morning. Jane Ford is going to light our chalice for us.
Good morning. Isn't it great to be back in the church again? Or the meeting house, I guess. As we begin our worship, we light our chalice to these words by the Reverend Rebecca Savage. We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly toward our highest ideals. And our opening hymn is in the Gray Book, number 148, Let Freedom Span Both East and West.
Okay, we got it. Thanks, everyone, for your sharing this morning. I just want to hold a little bit of space for a lot of the sadness that was expressed in this space just now. Will you just join me in a few moments of silence? Holy One, you of many names and no name at all, hold us in this space this morning. Hear the prayers on our lips and in our hearts. Help us to witness to those around us and help us to witness to ourselves and our own needs for wholeness in this moment. As the long winter continues on, may we find rest within the waiting and the isolation. May we uncover the gifts that may exist alongside the struggle. May we persist in gentleness with ourselves and our tender hearts. And may we be ever reminded that in this extraordinary time of our lives and the life of our world, that we can still love and be loved. That our presence with and for each other is a blessing. That we are capable of surviving so many challenges because we have each other and we have this beloved community. In the name of the great love that surpasses all understanding, amen. Let us now be still together.
And now it's time for our offertory. When we give, we say yes to something we value. In this congregation, we take up an offering each week to say yes to the values of our UU faith and yes to this beloved community. Together, we use these gifts to serve with ever greater love. Please give as you're able. Today's offering will be gratefully received. Our offering anthem is "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free" by Billy Taylor, and sung today by Tom Agello.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I should say. Say them loud, say them clear, for the whole round world to hear. I wish I could share all the love that's in my heart, remove all the bars that keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree every man should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm way overdue. I'd be starting. I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it could be if I could fly. Oh, I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I'd sing 'cause I know. Yeah, I'd sing 'cause I know. Well, I'd sing 'cause I know how it feels to be free.
Thank you, Tom. This morning's eulogy is from Reverend J. is from Martin Luther King, getting them mixed up here, for the James Reid. James Reid was a Unitarian Universalist minister from Roxbury, Massachusetts. In 1965, following a violent confrontation between police and nonviolent protests in Selma, Alabama, Reverend Reid answered Martin Luther King's call to religious leaders to join their efforts there. While in Selma, Reverend Reid was attacked outside a restaurant and died from his injuries 2 days later. Dr. King gave the eulogy at his funeral, and here is an excerpt from that eulogy. Naturally, we're compelled to ask the question, who killed James Reid? The answer is simple and rather limited when we think of the who. He was murdered by a few sick, demented, and misguided men who had the strange notion that you express dissent through murder. There is another haunting, poignant, desperate question we're forced to ask. What killed James Reid? When we move from the who to the what, the blame is wide and responsibility grows. James Reid was murdered by the indifference of every minister who has remained silent behind the security of stained glass windows. He was murdered by the irrelevancy of a church that will stand amid social evil and serve as a taillight rather than a headlight, an echo rather than a voice. He was murdered by the irresponsibility of every politician who has moved down the path of demagoguery, who has fed his constituents the stale bread of hatred and the spoiled meat of racism. He was murdered by the brutality of every sheriff and law enforcement agent who practices lawlessness in the name of the law. He was murdered by the timidity of a federal government that could spend millions of dollars a day to keep troops in South Vietnam, yet could not protect the lives of its own citizens seeking constitutional rights. So in his death, James Reid says something to each of us, black and white alike, says that we must substitute courage for caution, says to us that we must be concerned not merely about who murdered him, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy which produced the murder. His death says to us that we must work passionately, unrelentingly, to make the American dream a reality, so he did not die in vain.
Thank you, Jane, for that reading. It's a tough one to hear, but it's important. How many of you have heard of James Reid before? Oh, good. Okay. You never know who knows what. So I'm glad to know that. And for those of you who didn't know who he was, now you know a little bit more. There's a lot more to read about him, but one of our UU heroes, to say the least, during the civil rights movement. So when I first read that eulogy, my first response was, wow, he is really calling everyone out, isn't he? I can't imagine what it must have been like to hear him preach. What an amazing prophet Martin Luther King was. My second thought was, okay, so that was written over 50 years ago, but he could just as easily be talking about now, about our moment in time right now, about today. He's talking to me, and he's talking to all of you. He's talking to all of us. And I have to confess, it's quite an indictment to take his words to heart, to hear ministers, myself included, described as indifferent and hiding behind their stained glass windows. Now, we don't have stained glass windows, but I get the message. To hear him describe the church as a taillight rather than a headlight, an echo rather than a voice. It can be easy to forget that Martin Luther King had some really sharp edges. He had some really hard truths for all of us. And that's the thing about prophets. They continue to speak, and sharply, even after they're long gone. So on this Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday, in a month when our Soul Matters theme is living with intention, I have to be honest, I really struggled with how to appropriately talk about Dr. King's legacy. Some Black ministers I know, including Black UU ministers, advise white ministers like myself not to preach about Dr. King at all on this day. Because in all of our earnestness, so many white ministers miss the mark. So many sermons and worship services only focus on a small slice of Dr. King's legacy, the MLK who had a dream, the MLK that saw the moral arc of the universe bending toward justice, the MLK that said only love can drive out hate. Now, these are all very important and inspirational messages, but the legacy that Dr. King leaves us is so much more than that. And I will also confess that I have preached one or two of those only love can drive out hate sermons in my short ministerial career, because to focus on the rest of his message, to focus on words like the ones he preached at James Reid's funeral, is to acknowledge that we have not come nearly as far as we could have in the last 50 years. It means recognizing that Black Americans still face many of the same oppressions that the civil rights movement fought to change, like voter suppression. I don't think I need to explain how that's still an issue right now, but also underfunded education and substandard healthcare, to name but a few. It means admitting the complicity of my own white privilege, embracing the reality that I live in a system that favors my skin tone over theirs by gifting me enormous benefits that I didn't earn. And facing all of that, this is a very confessional sermon if you hadn't gotten there yet, facing all of that sends me down a shame spiral that pretty much shuts me down, makes me feel guilty and powerless. And it's not a good place for me to be, for anyone to be, and it's certainly not a place where anything of use can be accomplished. And that's why I chose the anthem that Tom sang so beautifully for us this morning. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. Because all of the hard feelings that racial reckoning brings up for me can only pale in comparison to what it means to still not be free in this country. And that's what I've been contemplating a lot this week. What would it feel like to not be free in this country today? I'm not going to tell you what it's like because I don't know. I haven't had to worry about not being free to live where I want, free to vote in each election, free to get a good education and receive health care. Unlike many people of color, I have been free from living with the traumatic knowledge that my ancestors were enslaved, that they were tortured and lynched, that they were subjected to Jim Crow laws, unjustly oppressed and imprisoned, and denied the ability to have a voice and a vote in this country for centuries. During this pandemic, which has been so hard for all of us, I haven't had to live with the legacy of mistreatment that the medical establishment has perpetrated on the Black community, from conducting experiments on slaves, forcing sterilization of Black women, and the routine daily injustices and biases that careful studies have proven Black people still face today. When I consider all of that, I actually understand a little bit more of why the Black community resisted the vaccine. In all of my life, I haven't known these realities because since my birth, I have been free. In your lifetime, how have you been free in ways you haven't ever had to think about? Because that's what we're talking about here, freedom, right? Freedom from centuries of oppression and harm. That's the dream that Dr. King was talking about, the dream of freedom. And for so many, it is still a dream, while for many others, like me, it has always been a reality. Dr. Cornel West, he's a Black activist, writer, and philosopher, wrote a book about the radical messages of Dr. King, entitled, appropriately, The Radical King. And in the introduction to his book, Dr. West says, quote, "The litmus test for realizing King's dream was neither a Black face in the White House nor a Black presence on Wall Street. Rather, the fulfillment of his dream was for all poor and working people to live lives of decency and dignity. So therefore, to live lives of freedom. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in justice and equity and compassion in all human relations. We believe that each person has inherent dignity and worth. Each person has the right to be free. And it is the UU commitment to collective liberation that pulled me into our faith all those years ago. The idea that none of us are free until all of us are free, that we are the communities that we belong to, that we are all part of the interdependent web, and therefore our fates are inherently tied together. That's the foundation of my faith as a UU and as a minister. In his book, Why We Can't Wait, published in 1964, Dr. King wrote this: "There are no outsiders in these 50 states of America. When a police dog buries his fangs in the ankle of a small child in Birmingham, he buries his fangs in the ankle of every American. The bell of one's inhumanity to another does not toll for any one person. It tolls for you, it tolls for me, it tolls for all of us." Moving towards collective liberation, towards freedom for all, means that we have to hear that bell tolling too. That we recognize that this is work we all have to do so all of us can be free. So whatever your work is, whether you call or write your elected representatives, whether you raise money for Black Lives Matter, whether you read to learn more about your own white privilege, whatever you do and however you do it, my prayer is that you and me, we may all hear the bell that is tolling for all of us. Because none of us are free until we're all free. And I pray today that that truth may be stitched on our hearts today and always. May it be so. Amen. Please rise if you are able and join us for our closing hymn in the teal hymnal number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.